The CNBC app. Global market news in one place. Customizable sections and personalized alerts. Stocks tracking, interactive charts and market insights all in your hands. Stay connected. Stay informed. Download the CNBC app today.
Good morning and welcome to Squawk Box Europe. I'm Juliana Tattlebaum with Carolyn Roth, and these are your headlines. A U.S. court strikes down the majority of Trump's tariffs, including his so-called reciprocal levies, ruling the president overstepped his authority in tying trade restrictions to the Emergency Economic Powers Act. Nvidia shares jump after revenue surges a better-than-expected 69% in the first quarter, even as CEO Jensen Huang criticizes the U.S. government's chip export restrictions.
Nvidia's market share in China was about 95%. 4 years ago. It's about 50% today because of the limitations on the products that we sell.
Elon Musk bids farewell to the White House, ending a tumultuous tenure and departing a day after calling a Republican bill to fund Trump's agenda, quote, disappointing.
A very warm welcome to the program. A special treat. Carolyn's joining me today and tomorrow in studio, and a treat for you as well. So, Carolyn, good morning.
Good morning. There's never a dull moment in global markets, right? You would think I come here, it's a quiet day for Europe today because many of the markets across Europe are closed today. But hey, what a surprise. Potentially the tariffs are struck down for now. Let's see. You've got the full story.
We certainly do. We thought we were going to be talking Nvidia, top of the show. We are going to get to Nvidia, but this story has trumped it, taking the honor of the top story this morning. A U.S. court striking down the majority of President Trump's tariff policies, including the supposed reciprocal tariffs he unveiled on April 2nd. The U.S. Court of International Trade found the president does not have the authority to impose tariffs using the Emergency Economic Powers Act. In its ruling, the court declared the tariffs as, quote, invalid as contrary to law. The White House is appealing the ruling. However, the court did not rule on industry-specific tariffs, such as Trump's levies on auto, steel, and aluminum, which were imposed citing different legislation. Now, the court's ruling is yet another twist in Trump's tariff program, with the president having already revised several levies. It's coined a phrase on Wall Street called the taco trade. Trump always chickens out. That came from Robert Armstrong over at the FT. That was put to the president by CNBC's Megan Casella. Take a listen.
Mr. President, Wall Street analysts have coined a new term called the taco trade. They're saying Trump always chickens out on your tariff threats, and that's why markets are higher this week. What's your response to that?
I kick out?
Chicken out.
Oh, isn't that nice? Chicken out. I've never heard that. You mean because I reduced China from 145% that I set down to 100 and then down to another number? And I said you have to open up your whole country, and because I gave the European Union a 50% tax tariff, and they called up and they said, please, let's meet right now. Please, let's meet right now. And I said, okay, I'll give you till July 9. I actually asked them, I said, what's the date? Because they weren't willing to meet. And after I did what I did, they said, we'll meet anytime you want. And we have an end date of July 9th. You call that chickening out? Because we have $14 trillion now invested, committed to investing.
U.S. futures this morning bouncing on that combination of news, the better than expected numbers from Nvidia yesterday after the market closed, and then this court ruling to block the majority of Trump's tariffs. Like taking a look at U.S. futures, you can see all three of the majors are in the green this morning, and a pretty hefty jump indicated in terms of the magnitude there. The Nasdaq looking to gain about 400 plus points, the Dow Jones looking to add almost 600 points, and the S&P 500 looking to open up stronger as well. We're also seeing a lot of action in the dollar this morning. The greenback strengthening versus a variety of currencies on the back of this court ruling. You've got the dollar stronger versus the euro, as well as the British pound here in the UK. We're seeing dollar rally versus the yen. Interesting trade there, up 0.8%, and dollar Swissy also trading on the front foot this morning. As for Asian markets overnight, our first indication of how equities are reacting in addition to what we're seeing in U.S. futures, and you've got green indicated across the board there. or green across the board, I should say. Nikkei 225 up 1.8%. The Hang Seng up 0.8%. The mainland Chinese market also reacting quite well. European futures. Here's what's in store for the European market open today. You're looking at green across the board here as well. And Carolyn, when I think about the implications of this court order on President Trump's tariffs, EU comes straight to mind. The EU is in the middle of an intense negotiation with the U.S. administration here. And if you are the Commission, why would you give anything away to the Trump administration when it looks like, at the moment anyway, President Trump's hands are tied?
You make a perfectly valid point here, and it's not just the EU. Of course, our focus is on the EU, but of course other countries, Switzerland, which I look at very closely, then other 50 nations that have the so-called preferred status, all the Asian nations who are currently still in negotiations with Donald Trump, and they're looking, hey, what is the EU doing? What are the other nations doing? So is everything on pause in terms of the negotiations, in terms of potential concessions here? But I'm really intrigued by the reaction when it comes to risk assets. Dollar obviously seeing a big pop here. And I do wonder, Juliana, is this just about potentially tariffs being blocked, being canceled, or is it more than that? Is it sort of the inherent trust returning to U.S. institutions, checks and balances actually working? Trump can't get away with everything. He can't just, splash an executive order left, right, and center. But this is actually checks and balances coming in, and the market is seeing that.
I think that does speak to the core of the worry for the market that we saw drive up the bond market volatility in April, the concern and the doubt around the U.S. Economic stability and the faith that the market had in U.S. institutions. But when it comes to this new ruling, I think a couple things to bear in mind here. Number one, the court has given the administration 10 days to effectuate its order. Don't have a huge amount of detail on in terms of steps to unwind the tariffs. Then there's the open question as to what happens to the duties already collected. Does President Trump and the U.S. administration have to pay back those duties that have already been collected?
That's a good point.
But then also, I mean, the thing to remember here is the ruling applies to the 10% baseline tariff, and it applies to the fentanyl-related tariffs. It doesn't apply to the sector tariffs, which have been imposed under different legislation, Section 232, Section 301. So could we simply see the administration shift its tariff policy to impose tariffs, reciprocal tariffs, under different legislation? Does it necessarily mean they're going away, or will we simply see a reframing of the tariffs?
Juliana, unfortunately, I do not have a law degree. I don't know about you, but I do not. I have an economics and finance degree, but not this. But, the bigger question here is what sort of leverage is Donald Trump left with? If he doesn't have this was his main piece of his main bargaining chip. What is he going to do now? And again, that goes back to the trade negotiations that are still going on. But we have 3 hours to discuss this, luckily.
And thankfully, we're going to have a little bit of help on the legal side of things. Coming up later on the show, we're going to discuss the court ruling blocking Trump's tariffs with Michelle Schultz, the founder and managing partner of Schultz Trade Law PLLC. She's a little bit better placed than Carolyn and I are to discuss the legal side of this ruling.
But we'll do our very best. All right, let's get back to our top story. The other top story, of course, Nvidia shares they're higher in extended trade after the chip giant beat top and bottom line expectations in the first quarter. The company's closely watched data center business posted revenue growth of over 70%. Yes, guidance for the current quarter was slightly softer than what analysts had expected, with Nvidia saying the expected revenue figure would have been $8 billion higher without recent restrictions on chip exports to China. CEO Jensen Huang told CNBC Nvidia is losing ground to local players in China.
Nvidia's market share in China was about 95% 4 years ago. It's about 50% today because of the limitations on the products that we sell. $50 billion a year market today. It's growing just like AI is growing everywhere. Over the course of this 4 years, the president's administration, we're probably talking about a few $100 billion worth of revenues.
All right, let's dig deeper into those numbers with Arjun, or should I say Jensen? I like that jacket.
Yeah, since we couldn't get him on the show, I thought I'd bring a bit of that energy here for Nvidia earnings day.
I mean, the numbers are really strong. And effectively, Nvidia is blocked out of its biggest market, China, of course, but still defying gravity. So talk us through all the numbers.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot more clarity on the exact impact now of some of those restrictions on China. We saw there would be, guidance, for example, would have been $8 billion more had it not been for these restrictions. They took a $4.5 billion write-down, which is actually less than the market had expected and what they had signaled before. And there was around 2.5 billion of lost revenue. They also said their margin would be over 71% versus 61, which what it was if those China restrictions hadn't been in place. So I think for a lot of investors, they were happy to get the clarity on China, put that aside and realize actually the core business is still very strong, even without the Chinese market for now. And I think that was a big positive as well from Nvidia in the results.
Looking at the reaction to his tone in the earnings call was interesting because, Christina Partsinevelos, our correspondent over at the NASDAQ, she said that he actually struck a pretty somber note on the earnings call, which is quite a contrast to what we usually hear from Jensen Huang. What was your take in terms of his overall tone on the call with investors?
I think he was a lot more focused at this point rather than on robotics and driverless cars and all these other areas he wants Nvidia to go to in the future. He felt a lot more focused on the present. So it was a lot more about the AI infrastructure build, which right now is the bread and butter for Nvidia, right? Selling the GPU. So he spoke a lot about the hyperscalers and the capex plans we've heard from the hyperscalers in their earnings season translated into revenue and profit for Nvidia. For example, he was saying some of the hyperscalers are deploying 72,000 GPUs per week. And so he was very much talking about that. He was then saying, well, we've done a lot of training. The next stage is AI inference reasoning, these models that actually sort of think through ideas and then come up with an answer. He said, you're going to need a lot more compute for this. And this is the next generation when it comes to AI development. We're going to see agentic AI, he said, which is going to be very much based on these reasoning models. And therefore, you are going to need a lot more GPUs from Nvidia, a lot more compute. And so he was very much focused there and then on Nvidia's core business on the call rather than sort of all the other futuristic areas he'd love Nvidia to go in on the future.
Fascinating. Well, Arj, stick around. We're going to bring in another voice on the Nvidia story. Brady Wang, Associate Director of Counterport Research, joins us now. Brady, thanks for joining us this morning. I'm curious to how you came away feeling from Nvidia's numbers last night and the earnings call. Are you left feeling more bullish or more bearish about Nvidia's outlook here?
Yeah, of course, I feel bullish to Nvidia's outlook and also its future. And I believe Jensen did share a lot of the new potential opportunities for Nvidia. Yeah, especially now they are creating the whole ecosystem from not only from the upside from the hyperscale and also to the enterprise, even to the edge, and also they are creating a full ecosystem. Yeah, so yeah, I think bullish to their future. Yeah.
I thought that Jensen Huang's comments on the U.S. approach to China were really interesting. On shielding Chinese chip makers from the U.S., he said competition only strengthens them abroad, weakens America's position. Export restrictions spurred China's innovation and scale. The AI race is not just about chips. It's about which stack the world runs on, suggesting that the U.S. approach to protecting or preventing exports of chips is going to ultimately handicap the U.S. long term. It's very short term to think that this is going to be a win for the administration. Does that make sense to you?
Yes, of course. I believe even without U.S. chip, China will still build their own chip, right? But however, with the ecosystem or the chip produced by U.S. company, no matter Nvidia or the others, it will slow down the development of the local the chip from the domestic, right? So as I mentioned earlier, it's about the ecosystem. It's about need to be supported, but not only the chip, but also the other components like the water coolings and also the other server ODM and ODMs, right? So it will, without Nvidia, China will build the whole ecosystem, right? But with Nvidia, China users will rely on its own ecosystem, right? And eventually, it will not give too much opportunities to the local suppliers.
Brady, this is Carolyn. I want to take you into a slightly different direction here. I want to talk about competition from its rivals, AMD, of course, Intel, but even the hyperscalers who are working on their own chips. We always talk about the big moat that Nvidia has. How big is it really, or is parts of it, or is it crumbling?
Yeah. So as I mentioned, Nvidia tried to create a whole ecosystem, and the others is competitors, and no matter the AIS company or the other GPU companies. Now, AMD tried to build up the whole ecosystem by itself, but it takes time, right? But the other competitors need to spend more time, to build up, its ecosystem, and it's still far behind Nvidia, right? So that's why Nvidia tried to attract the other like AIS vendors to join their ecosystem and to make sure they can be part of the ecosystem created by the Nvidia.
Brady, can I just tackle scaling laws with you for a second? Because this is very much core to future growth for Nvidia. On the one hand, Jensen Huang is saying in the age of AI, inference reasoning models, agentic AI, we're going to need more compute. On the other hand, when you listen to Chinese internet giants like Tencent, Baidu, and even DeepSeek's latest R1 update that was released in the last few hours, they're suggesting that software optimization, smaller models means they could do more with fewer GPUs. Where do you sit in that as you look at the industry? Is the scaling laws that Jensen's talking about still intact, or are what the Chinese player is saying more accurate?
It's a good question, also frequently asked questions, but I believe it does not contradict to each other. The new algorithm from, for example, the DeepSeek, led to lower the hardware requirement for the specific application. However, we know now generative AI now is still in early stage, right? In the past, we are happy to see the text generative AI for the text, right? Like the ChatGPT, right? Rewrite the article or the sentence, right? But now we are moving to the voice, moving to the video, which means people have much higher expectation for generative AI applications, which means the hardware requirement will need to increase, right? So I don't think the two concepts contradict to each other. In the long run, we will still need more and more computing power in order to fulfill what we really need, right? And the algorithm from China to help to lower the hardware spec for current application, but as I mentioned earlier, we are moving to the high-end applications. We won't always satisfy with current applications, right?
Brady, what do you think the stock is going to do? Not just today, we're seeing a nice pop after hours, but over the next couple of days and weeks or so. Is this a stock that can rejuvenate the space even more so than it has done over the last couple of weeks? It is off. It is higher, 40% from its April lows, but on the year, pretty much flat. Where do you think the trajectory goes here?
I won't comment about the stock, but I believe we do see the Nvidia bring good futures, and at least the outcome, at least for this year and the coming years. Yeah. So yeah, that's my answer.
Brady, appreciate you joining us. Great to get your thoughts post results. Brady Wang, Associate Director, Counterpoint Research, and Arjun, thank you for running us through the numbers. We'll hopefully chat more later in the show. The Trump administration has reportedly told U.S. companies producing chip design software to stop selling their services to Chinese companies, according to multiple media reports. The move would mark the latest attempt to slow China's development of advanced chips, with a Commerce Department official saying it is reviewing exports of strategic significance to China.
All right, still coming up on the show, a federal trade court strikes down Trump's reciprocal tariffs, potentially dealing the president a major blow to his economic agenda. We'll have much more on the ruling next. Plus, Shein reportedly skips London in favor of a Hong Kong listing. We'll discuss in around 15 minutes' time. And aviation services firm Swissport announces their first autonomous vehicles for ground handling. We'll be joined by the CEO at 8:30 London time. We'll be back in 2. Welcome back to the show. French President Emmanuel Macron pressed ahead in his Southeast Asia tour, arriving in Indonesia's capital, Jakarta, on Tuesday. The visit has seen the two countries sign a preliminary defense pact that could lead to new orders of French military equipment. Charlotte joins us now from Paris. Talk to us about the significance of that deal, Charlotte.
Well, we know that this trip has been particularly important because President Macron is basically asserting France and the EU as a reliable trade partner at a time where we see a reconfiguration of the trade relations. Of course, when we see, different trade relations with the US and also a more and more assertive China in that region. Certainly try to pitch a third way and something that may be particularly appealing to the leader of Indonesia, Prabowo Subianto. It's a man that has a relationship with President Macron over the past few years, currently as president, but also over the past 5 years as defense minister. We know that France is a key partner when it comes to defense, given the manufacturing capability that it has. And so we've had several deals in the past already between France and Indonesia. Just last year, Indonesia completed the order of 42 Dassault Rafale fighter jets, also 2 Scorpion submarines, also some Thales radars as well. So this visit, the second leg of the Southeast Asia visit of President Macron in Indonesia, is seen as quite important on that front. And yesterday, the two presidents in Jakarta signed in this preliminary defense pact that, according to President Macron, opens the perspective of new orders for fighter jets and submarines and other elements going forward. So this could have a value of up to $11 billion as well. But other deals were also signed, including with Eramet, the mining company from France. We know that Indonesia has an important nickel sources as well, particularly important metal for EVs and batteries as well. Danone and Total Energy also signing some deals. So a relationship between the two countries potentially getting closer going forward. And he will continue, President Macron, his visit to Indonesia today before flying later today to Singapore, where he will be giving an important keynote speech at the defense conference, the Shangri-La Dialogue.
Charlotte, thank you so much for this. I do have a question for you, and it's a very important one. And I'm saying this tongue-in-cheek, obviously, but the slap, le slap, as they call it. First of all, how do the French call it? I know it's reverberated across the globe. And Macron said, hey, we've got bigger fish to fry than the slap that happened. Talk to us about the splash it's made.
Yes, indeed, that was very much picked up, and we saw President Macron a bit aggravated by this, talking about how there's been a lot of campaign of fake news against him when he was traveling to Ukraine, where there was a tissue on the table and it was sort of smear campaign saying this was cocaine. Of course, I had to come out and say, of course, this is ridiculous. He said this is part of this campaign, and he said, look, there was no problem there with his wife, and that, of course, we have to focus on the big issue here, and that his trip there to Southeast Asia is dealing with some important issue at a time, of course, we know geopolitical importance. And he seemed a little bit aggravated when he was asked about this by a journalist yesterday. But certainly that did grab a lot of headlines, so he did have to come out and comment.
He did seem a little aggravated when asked. He also seemed a little bit shocked, I think, when caught on camera when the push happened. Charlotte, thanks for bringing us all the most important news from France this morning.
On the back of that, on LinkedIn, I did see a lot of posts about domestic violence targeted towards men. So maybe it's opened up a whole different conversation. On a niche topic, or maybe not so niche. I don't know.
I don't think whether it's certainly the case that President Macron didn't intend to bring this topic to light. You can definitely tell from his aggravation yesterday that this is not where he wanted the focus to be on his tour of Southeast Asia. Well, sticking with Europe, the EU has urged Spain's government not to block banking consolidation after it announced a ministerial review of BBVA's bid for rival Sabadell. The European Commission's Financial Services spokesperson said there was no basis for stopping a deal if it meets risk and competition standards, with the EU believing consolidation is needed to support its savings and investment union. Italian Economy Minister Giancarlo Giorgetti says he would resign if he is overruled on takeover conditions the government has placed on Unicredit's bid for Banco BPM. Giorgetti told reporters there are no disagreements with Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni on the restrictions, as the co-governing Forza Italia party, led by Foreign Minister Antonio Tajani, pushes Meloni to ease the terms.